The words exploded out of me like a grenade in the quiet kitchen, shattering the fragile peace we'd built over years of unspoken lies. Dad, I'm gay, and I can't pretend anymore. John's face crumpled, not with shock, but with a raw, haunted recognition that hit me harder than any rejection could. His coffee mug slipping from his hand to shatter on the tile floor. Dark liquid pooling like the secrets we'd both been drowning in. I expected yelling, maybe a slammed door, the kind of small-town American fallout that ends with you packing a bag at dawn. But instead, he sank into the chair, his broad shoulders, once the unbreakable frame of my childhood hero, hunching like a man carrying ghosts he'd buried decades ago. "Alex," he whispered, voice cracking like dry earth under summer heat. "You think you're the first in this family to fight that war." That was the moment the floor dropped out from under me. The summer of my 25th year in Elmwood, Ohio, a nowhere town where cornfields stretched like endless regrets and the local diner still served pie with a side of judgment. I'd driven back from Columbus that humid July afternoon, the air thick with the scent of impending rain, my heart pounding harder than the old pickup's engine. James and I had been together 6 months, stolen weekends in his cramped apartment off High Street, where we'd laugh over bad takeout and trace maps of our future on each other's skin. He was the spark I'd never known I needed, tall, with that easy grin and eyes like polished oak. A graphic designer who dreamed big in a world that tried to box him small. But coming home to Elmwood meant facing the man who'd raised me alone after Mom's cancer took her when I was 12. John Harlan, the stoic mechanic who'd fixed every broken thing in my life, except, maybe, himself. We'd always been close. Dad and me, fishing trips to Lake Erie, late-night talks about the Reds' slim chances in the playoffs. He never remarried, said work and me were enough. But lately, the distance had grown, a chasm I chalked up to my own guilt. Every time I hung up from call with James, I'd catch Dad watching me with that far-off stare, like he was seeing someone else in my reflection. It built until I couldn't breathe, until the lie felt like barbed wire around my ribs. So there, in our linoleum-floored kitchen with its faded cabinets and the hum of the ancient fridge, I let it rip. His confession came slow, like pulling teeth from a lifetime of silence. "Sit down, son. This ain't just about you." I did, the chair scraping loud in the stillness, my pulse thundering. He rubbed his calloused hands together, knuckles white, then met my eyes, blue like mine, but shadowed with something ancient and aching. "Your grandpa, my old man, he was a hard ass. Baptist through and through, the kind who quoted Leviticus like it was the weather report. Back in '78, I was 19, fresh out of high school, working at the mill in Dayton. And there was this guy, Caleb. We met at a county fair, of all places. He was passing through, some drifter with a guitar and stories that made the world feel bigger than Ohio. John paused, his voice dipping low, and I leaned in, the air between us electric with the weight of it. Caleb sounded like a fever dream, a free spirit with sun-bleached hair and a laugh that cut through the fairground noise like sunlight. They'd snuck off behind the Ferris wheel, shared stolen kisses under the Midway lights, the kind of reckless summer blaze that burns hot and leaves scars. But it wasn't just puppy love. It was the first time John felt seen, truly seen, in a body and soul he'd been taught to hate. "We planned to run off to California," he said, a ghost of a smile flickering. He had a cousin in San Francisco, said we'd make it as musicians or something stupid like that. But one night, the cops rolled up, Caleb's truck parked too long in the wrong lot. They dragged him in for indecent conduct, beat the hell out of him in the back of the cruiser. I heard about it on the radio the next day. Never saw him again. The story hung there, raw and unfinished, and I felt a twist in my gut, not pity, but a fierce, protective rage for the boy my dad had been. Why didn't you ever tell me? Or anyone? He shrugged. That old mechanic shrug. Like fixing a busted transmission was easier than mending a broken heart. Because secrets keep you alive in places like this. I married your mom right after. Try to play straight. She knew. Alex, God rest her. She knew and loved me anyway. But after she passed, I just locked it down. Buried it with the rest. We sat there till dusk bled into the windows. The rain finally breaking loose outside, drumming a rhythm on the roof like applause for truths long overdue. That night, I texted James, told Dad. It's complicated. Come over. He showed up an hour later. Rain slicked and steady, pulling me into a hug that smelled of wet asphalt and his cedar cologne. John watched from the porch, a nod of something like approval in his eyes. And for the first time, the house felt less like a cage and more like a bridge. But bridges, I've learned, can burn fast. The next weekend, James and I drove to Cincinnati for a Pride event. Nothing huge, just a block party with rainbow flags snapping in the breeze and food trucks slinging queer comfort food. We danced under string lights, his hand warm in mine, the city pulse syncing with my own. Your dad's cool with it? He asked later, sprawled on my childhood bed while I packed for the week ahead. I hesitated, the weight of John's story still fresh. Yeah, more than cool. He gets it. James's brow furrowed. That thoughtful crease I loved. Must be nice. Mine still calls it a phase. James's family was old Elmwood stock, his dad a lawyer in town. Mom the queen of PDA bake sales. They'd raised him in a brick colonial on Maple Street. All polished surfaces and polite silences. He came out in college. Got the cold shoulder that never quite thawed. It made our bond fiercer. Two guys from the same dirt road roots carving out space in a world that didn't always make room. But as summer deepened, cracks started showing, not in us, but in the stories we carried. It started with a box in the attic. I'd gone up there hunting for Mom's old photo albums. The ones with us three at Cedar Point, laughing like the world was infinite. Instead, I found John's war chest, faded letters tied with twine, a tarnished locket, and, at the bottom, a stack of Polaroids yellowed with age. Caleb grinned out from one, arms slung around a younger John, both shirtless by a riverbank, beers in hand and eyes locked in that unguarded way lovers have. My throat tightened. It was beautiful, brutal in its honesty. Tucked in the locket was a tiny note. To Jay, wait for me in the city of gold. See, I showed James that night. Our takeout forgotten on the coffee table. He traced the photo with his finger. Voice soft. Your dad was brave as hell. Hiding this. It must have eaten him alive. We made love then. Slow and reverent. Like we were weaving John's ghost into our own tapestry. But the next morning, over coffee, James went quiet, staring at his mug. Alex. That name, Caleb. It rings a bell. My uncle. He mentioned a guy like that once. Back in the 80s. Said he got run out of town after some scandal. The words landed like a sucker punch. Uncle? James's family tree tangled with Elmwood's old vines. And suddenly, Caleb wasn't just a specter. He was a thread pulling at the edges of everything. I laughed it off, chalked it to small-town coincidence. But doubt wormed in. That afternoon, I cornered Dad in the garage, oil smudged on his cheek as he tinkered with the Buick. Caleb, did he have family here? Connections? John's wrench clattered to the bench, his face paling. Why? I told him about James, about the uncle's vague memory. Dad's eyes darkened. Storms brewing. Caleb's cousin. He settled here after. Married into the Millers. That's James's line, ain't it? The garage spun, tools blurring on the walls. Betrayal hit first, not from Dad, but from the universe, for dangling hope only to snatch it back. You knew? All this time, he shook his head, vehement. No, son. Swear it. But if it's true, God, the Millers, they run this town. If they knew about me and Caleb, the implications crashed like thunder. James's dad, Harlan Miller, no relation to us. Thank Christ. But a pillar of Elmwood's conservative core. The man who'd led the charge against the school's gay agenda books last year. If Caleb was the black sheep run off, and John the forbidden flame, it could unravel families, reputations, the fragile peace we'd just forged. I didn't tell James. Not yet. Instead, I drove to the lake alone, skipping stones into the gray water, each plunk echoing the what-ifs. What if his family knew? What if they'd whispered poison about that Harlan boy for generations? James texted, "Miss you already." Dinner at mine? I typed back yes, but my fingers shook. Romance, I'd thought, was simple, two hearts beating in sync. But secrets? They were landmines, buried deep in the American dream we all pretended was colorblind. The dinner was a minefield disguised as lasagna. James's apartment overlooked the Scioto River. Fairy lights strung across exposed brick. A playlist of indie folk humming low. He moved around the kitchen with that effortless grace, chopping basil like it was therapy, but I was a live wire. Every laugh forced, every touch laced with the unsaid. "You okay?" he asked, sliding a plate across the scarred oak table, his knee brushing mine under it, a spark that should have ignited comfort but instead fanned my dread. "Yeah, just dad stuff." Line number 1. We ate in companionable silence at first, the kind built on months of easy intimacy. But my mind raced ahead to confrontations I couldn't unsee. What if Harlan Miller, James's dad, had been the one to tip off the cops back in '78? Small towns bred grudges like weeds, and the Millers owned half the farmland ringing Elmwood. Caleb's disappearance wasn't just bad luck. It was a warning shot across the bow of anyone daring to love outside the lines. James caught my drift eventually, setting down his fork with a clink. "Spill it. Harlan, you've got that look like you're wrestling a ghost." His eyes, warm and searching, pinned me. I caved, the Polaroids burning a hole in my pocket where I'd stashed them. "It's about Caleb. Dad's first love. And your uncle's story. It lines up too perfect." I handed him the photos, watching his face shift from curiosity to shock. Then something sharper, betrayal's first cousin. Confusion. He flipped through them, thumb lingering on John's young smile. "This is insane. My Uncle Ted, he was Caleb's cousin. Yeah. He came back here after the arrest. Married Aunt Lydia. Built that big house on the hill. But he never talked details. Just said Caleb got what was coming for chasing trouble." James's voice hardened on that last bit, and I saw the fracture, his family's polished legacy, now cracked with complicity. "You think they knew? About your dad?" The question hung, unanswered because I didn't know, couldn't know, without ripping open wounds neither of us deserved. We cleared the plates in silence, the river glittering mockingly outside, all silver promise under a harvest moon. Later, tangled in his sheets, I held him close, our breaths sinking like a truce. "Whatever it is," he murmured against my neck, "we face it together. No more hiding." I nodded into his hair, but sleep evaded me, the ceiling a map of maybes. Monday brought the storm. I was back at the garage with Dad, handing him tools like an extension of his arm. the radio droning classic rock to fill the quiet. He'd been distant since our talk, burying himself in engines like they could outrun regret. "You tell the boy," he grunted, wiping grease from his brow. "Not everything. Truth. Half spoken." That's when the phone rang. Harlan Miller's number on the caller ID. The kind of call that stops your heart. Dad answered. His hello, clipped and wary. I strained to hear, catching snippets at old times. "Caleb, need to talk." The line went dead, and John looked at me like I'd aged him 10 years. "He's coming over. Tonight." Panic clawed up my throat. "Dad? No. Not without." But he waved me off. That stubborn Harlan jaw set. "This ends now. Alex. Secret's been rotting us long enough." I bolted for James, tires squealing on the blacktop, arriving at his door breathless. He pulled me inside, concern etching lines around his mouth. "What's wrong?" "Your dad." He called mine. "About Caleb." The words tumbled out, and James froze, then grabbed his keys. "We're going. Now." The drive back was a blur of cornstalk sentinels and sodium-lit roads. Our hands clasped over the console like lifelines. We pulled into the driveway just as Harlan's Cadillac crunched gravel. The man himself stepping out, silver-haired, impeccable in khakis and a polo, the picture of Midwestern respectability. Inside, the living room felt like a courtroom, Dad on the couch, me and James flanking him like sentries, Harlan in the armchair, his gaze flicking between us with calculated calm. "John," he started, voice smooth as bourbon. "I heard from Ted." The boy's stirring up old dirt. His eyes landed on me. Then James, sharpening. "Didn't raise my son to dig graves." James bristled. "Dad, what the hell? If this is about..." Harlan cut him off, turning to John with a sigh that reeked of pity. Caleb was trouble. Always was. Ran with the wrong crowd. Got himself arrested fair and square. "You were just a kid." "Johnny, don't let ghosts rewrite history." But there was an edge, a flicker of something darker. And Dad leaned forward, voice steady as rebar. "Fair? They beat him half to death for kissing a boy. And you knew. Harlan. Your daddy was sheriff, signed to report himself." The room detonated. Harlan's face flushed crimson. Denial sputtering. "Lies. We protected this town from perversion." James shot up, chair scraping. "From people like us? Like me?" The accusation landed like a slap. And for the first time, I saw the mask crack on Harlan Miller, the righteous facade crumbling to reveal the fear beneath. The same terror that had silenced John for decades. It spilled then. The full rot. Harlan's father, the sheriff, had covered for his own brother's indiscretions while crucifying outsiders like Caleb. Ted, James's uncle, had whispered the tip that led to the arrest, trading a cousin's freedom for family honor. Betrayal layered on betrayal. A generational poison seeping into our blood. James stormed out, Harlan calling after him in vain. And I followed, the screen door banging like a final judgment. We ended up at the lake again, James hurling rocks into the dark water, sobs racking his frame. How do I go home to that, knowing what they did? I wrapped my arms around him from behind, chin on his shoulder, the night air cool against our heat. You don't have to. Not alone. We stayed till stars pricked the sky, talking in circles, anger at our fathers, grief for Caleb's stolen life, a fierce love that felt like the only solid ground left. But as we drove back, James's phone buzzed, a text from his mom. Your father's in the hospital. Heart episode. Come now. Guilt twisted like a knife. Had the confrontation pushed him over, James floored it, me navigating through tears, the ER lights harsh as accusations. Harlan lay pale in the bed, monitors beeping a fragile rhythm, his wife hovering like a shadow. She glared at us, the interloper, but James pushed past, taking his dad's hand. Why, Dad? Why hide it all? Harlan's eyes fluttered open, weak but clear. To protect you, son, for what it does. What it did to me. The admission hung. A bridge extended across the chasm. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but a crack in the armor. John arrived later, cap in hand, and the four of us sat in vigil, two families entwined by history's cruel knot, whispering apologies into the sterile air. Days blurred into a tense détente. James and I shuttled between homes, nursing wounds and mending fences. Dad opened up more, sharing Caleb's letters over whiskey on the porch, his voice gaining strength with each page. He wrote from San Francisco eventually. Cleaned up, found a life. Died in '09, cancer. Like your mom, the parallel stung, but it humanized the loss. Turned ghost a man. Yet the real fracture came from within. One crisp September evening, James and I argued fierce, the kind that leaves bruises on the soul. It started over nothing, a forgotten chore, a snide comment about family obligations, but it escalated, years of suppressed rage bubbling up. You get to play hero, coming out all noble, he snapped, pacing my living room. My family's the villains, thanks to your dad's past. The words were a blade, slicing deep. I fired back, like you didn't know Elmwood's rotten core. We're both from here. James, this is us. He left in a huff, door slamming, and I collapsed on the couch, the silence deafening. Betrayal echoed, not just from our fathers, but from each other. The assumption that love could weather any storm without us rowing the boat. I drove to his place at midnight, rain sheeting the windshield, heart in my throat. He answered in sweats, eyes red-rimmed, and pulled me inside without a word. We talked till dawn, raw and unfiltered, his fear of becoming his father, my terror of losing him to the weight of it all. I love you, he said finally, simple as breath. But we can't fix them. Just us. That vulnerability cracked me open. And we rebuilt from there, therapy sessions in Columbus, pride stickers on our cars, quiet dates at the diner where waitresses finally stopped side-eyeing. Dad and Harlan met once more, neutral ground at the VFW hall, beers in hand and old wounds aired like laundry. No hugs, no Hallmark tears, but a nod of mutual respect. The American way, progress in inches. As fall turned to winter, the high came unexpected, a letter from Caleb's estate, forwarded through Ted. Inside, a bequest, his guitar, rest-strung and polished, with a note for John, for the boy who taught me to dream. Play on. Dad strung it up in the garage, and one snowy night, he played for us, chords rough but true, James harmonizing on an old harmonica. The music filled the house, chasing shadows, and in that moment, I saw it, redemption not as erasure, but as harmony amid the discord. Winter in Elmwood wrapped us in a hush, snow blanketing the fields like a fresh start. But secrets have roots that thaw unevenly. James and I settled into a rhythm, mornings tangled in his bed, afternoons sketching logos for his freelance gigs, while I tinkered with Dad's books at the garage. It felt solid, the kind of love that withstands blizzards. But doubt lingered like frost on the windows. Harlan's health scare had forced a fragile peace. But at family dinners, his glances at James carried a new wariness, like he was measuring the cost of acceptance against a lifetime of denial. One February evening, it all unraveled again. We'd gather at the Millers for what was billed as a neutral holiday. No tree, just pie and pretense. I sat across from Harlan, forcing small talk about the Browns' playoff drought, while James squeezed my knee under the table. His touch is silent, we got this. But then Ted arrived late. Uncle Ted, with his bluff laugh and beer gut, clapping John on the back like old war buddies. "Johnny Harlan, heard you two buried the hatchet. Good on ya." The room tensed. Silverware pausing midair. Dad nodded curtly, but I caught the flicker, old wounds itching. Over pie. Ted got loose-lipped, the port flowing like truth serum. "Remember that summer? 78? Caleb hightailing it out west after his little adventure." He chuckled, oblivious, but James stiffened beside me. "Uncle Ted, drop it. Too late." Harlan cleared his throat, voice tight. "Son, it's water under the bridge. Not for everyone." James's words sliced clean, and heads turned. I felt the pull, the urge to mediate, but this was his fight. Ted blinked, feigning innocence. "What? The kid got mixed up with the wrong sort, that's life." Sheriff did what he had to. John's four clattered, his face ashen. "The wrong sort? That was me. Ted." "Me and Caleb." The admission boomed, sucking air from the room. Harlan's wife gasped, hand to her pearls, and Ted sputtered. "Now, Johnny, you don't mean..." "I do." Dad's voice held, steel forged in silence. "And your brother-in-law's daddy made sure it ended bloody." Chaos erupted, chairs scraping, voices overlapping in a cacophony of denial and defense. James shoved back from the table, eyes blazing at Ted. "You tipped them off? For what? Family pride. You know better than the bigots you preach against." Harlan rose, face thunderous. "Enough. This is my house. Your house of cards," I shot back, standing with James, our united front a shield. The argument spilled into the hall, accusations flying like shrapnel, Ted's complicity, Harlan's willful blindness, the generational sin of looking away. James's mom herded us out into the snow, tears freezing on her cheeks. "He loves you, James. Give him time." But time felt like a luxury we couldn't afford. Not when every revelation peeled back another layer of rot. We drove in silence to the riverfront, the wipers slapping rhythmically against the flurries. James parked under a street lamp, its glow haloing his profile in gold. "I can't do this. Alex. Pretend we're okay when my blood's tainted." His voice broke, and mine joined it. "Then what? Walk away? From us?" He turned, eyes fierce with love and fear. "No. From them. Maybe we start fresh, Columbus. A place that doesn't choke on its own history." The idea terrified and thrilled me. A leap from Elmwood's gravity. But betrayal's aftertaste was bitter. I'd seen Dad's eyes in that moment, vulnerable as a boy's, and leaving felt like abandoning the man who'd finally bared his soul. We argued under the dashboard light, words tumbling like the snow outside, his need for escape, my loyalty's anchor. "You're choosing ghosts over me," he accused, and it stung true. I grabbed his hand, desperate. "No. Choosing truth. For all of us." We made up in the truck's cab, kisses salty with unshed tears, bodies pressing close against the cold. It was messy, human, the romance of real life. Not fairy tales. But dawn brought resolve. We'd push for more. Not flight. Therapy for the families. A town hall on hidden histories. James and I as reluctant spearheads. Dad agreed over breakfast, his nod gruff but proud. About time this place faced the mirror. Spring unfurled green and tentative. Dogwoods blooming like hesitant apologies along the back roads. James and I threw ourselves into it, organizing a queer history read at the library. Posters plastered with faded photos like Dad's Polaroids. Anonymized, but evocative. Turnout was small. A dozen locals sipping weak coffee. But Harlan showed, uninvited, standing at the back with arms crossed. When Q&A hit, he raised a hand, voice gravelly. I was wrong. About a lot. My boy. He's teaching me. Applause rippled. Tentative. And James's eyes met mine across the room. Love. Unfiltered. The kind that endures reckonings. But climax brewed in shadows. Late one April night, as thunder rumbled prelude to a storm, Dad called me to the garage. He held a manila envelope, postmarked San Francisco, hands trembling. From Caleb's lawyer. Final bequest. Inside, letters. More photos. And a confession, Caleb's account of that night. Corroborated by a witness long silent. Ted's tip. Yes. But Harlan's father pulling strings to bury it. Protecting not just family, but a lover of his own. Hushed up in the 60s. The sheriff, hypocrite to the core, had preached fire and brimstone while nursing his own forbidden flame. It runs deeper than we knew, Dad murmured, collapsing onto a stool. Harlan, he must have suspected, rage and pity warred in me. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a chain, linking us all in hypocrisy's forge. I drove to James's, envelope burning in my lap, arriving as lightning cracked the sky. He opened the door, towel around his waist from shower. Concern instant. Alex, what's? I thrusted at him, words failing. He read in the lamplight, face draining of color, then crumpling the paper as sobs took him. My grandfather? God. The lies. We held each other on the floor, storm raging outside, our tears mingling in a flood of shared grief. Betrayal's peak, not one villain, but a tapestry of them, woven through bloodlines we'd never escape. Yet in the wreckage, something shifted. James looked up, eyes storm-cleared. We expose it. All of it, not destruction, but light, humanity's messy grace. We drafted the op-ed together, fingers flying over keys, Dad adding his voice, even Harlan penning a halting addendum. Published in the county paper, it hit like a quake, headlines screaming Elmwood's hidden queer legacy, letters pouring in, stories from closets cracked open, alliances forged in the fallout. Summer returned, humid and healing. James and I stood on that lakeside dock one golden morning, the one we'd claimed as ours, foreheads touching as mist rose from the water. No grand gestures, just us flannel-clad, hands linked, the future a horizon we'd navigate together. Dad found peace playing Caleb's guitar at the fair. Harlan attended with tentative pride. And Elmwood, that stubborn American heartland town, inched toward wholeness. But wholeness isn't perfection. It's the courage to love through the scars. As we walked back to the truck, James squeezed my hand. Ready for forever? I grinned, heart full. With you, always, in the rear view. Elmwood shrank, not abandoned, but honored, a place of ghosts laid to rest, where secrets birthed not chains, but wings. Forever, in the American sprawl, means road trips and reckonings, pit stops at diners where waitresses call you Han without batting an eye. James and I loaded the truck that Labor Day, bound for Columbus, not fleeing, but forwarding, a lease signed on a loft overlooking the river, close enough for weekend visits, but far enough to breathe. Dad hugged me fierce on the porch, Caleb's guitar case propped nearby like a talisman. Proud of you, son. Both of you. Harlan lingered by his Cadillac, a gruff, take care, masking the thaw in his eyes. Progress, inch by inch. The city swallowed us whole at first, bustling streets alive with possibility, pride flags fluttering year-round from balconies. James's designs took off. Clients lining up for his bold lines and hidden hearts. I enrolled in night classes for accounting, dreaming of a firm that served queer-owned businesses. Nights were ours. Rooftop barbecues with friends who'd never known a closet. Slow dances in the kitchen to Springsteen crooning about highways and ghosts. But Elmwood's tendrils pulled. Subtle at first, a call from Dad about the garage's leaky roof. Then Harlan's quiet request for James to co-sign a community grant for a youth center. Something neutral for the kids. We went back for Thanksgiving, the air crisp with leaf smoke and unspoken hopes. The dinner was a miracle of sorts. 2 tables pushed together. Turkey carved with steady hands. Laughter edging out the awkward pauses. Ted stayed away. His apology a terse email. But his absence felt like space claimed. Over pie, Harlan pulled me aside to the den. Photos of James as a kid spread on the desk, gap-toothed grins and baseball mitts. I was blind. Alex. To him. To myself. That letter. It woke me. His voice roughened. And I saw the man beneath. Not monster, but mortal. Shaped by a father's whip and a town's whispers. Forgive? Maybe not. Understand? Yeah. I nodded. The weight lifting a fraction. Humanistic? That's what it was, not erasure. But empathy's hard-won grace. James and I stole away after. Driving to the fairgrounds where it all began for Dad and Caleb. Now quiet under a harvest moon. Midway ghosts stirring in the wind. We walked the empty paths. Hands swinging. Sharing dreams. A wedding someday. Maybe on this very soil. Rainbow vows under Ferris lights. Think they'd approve? He asked, nodding to the shadows. I pulled him close, lips brushing his temple. They already do. Winter hit Columbus with a vengeance. Snow piling drifts against our windows. But inside we built warmth, holiday lights strung like promises. A menorah beside the tree for James's lapsed Jewish roots. Dad visited once, awkward in the urban buzz, but he warmed to it, even joining a drag brunch where queens in sequins roasted his flannel. Bolder than Elmwood, he admitted over Eggs Benedict. A wink my way. Harlan sent a card, stiff, but sign love. Dad, and James framed it. Cracks and all. Spring brought the twist. The kind that tests love's metal. I got a call from an unknown number, a social worker in San Francisco, tracing Caleb's final wishes. Turns out, he'd left a trust, not riches, but a modest fund for the Harlan boy and his kin, earmarked for education or a home. He never stopped hoping you'd find each other again, she said, voice kind over the line. Dad wept when I told him. The check clutched like absolution. Use it for the center, he insisted. And we did, bricks laid for a safe space. Named Caleb's Crossing in quiet ceremony. The opening drew crowds. Elmwood's faithful mingling with city allies. Speeches short and heartfelt. James emceed. Voice steady. Eyes locking on mine from the podium. This isn't about forgetting the past. It's about building from it. Harlan spoke next. Halting but honest. Earning nods instead of jeers. As confetti rained, biodegradable, rainbow-hued, I pulled James behind the stage, kissing him fierce amid the cheers. Our high note, I whispered. He laughed, breathless. Symphony's just starting, yet no story ends tidy. Life's drama simmers. Summer found us arguing again, over money. The trust's weight a subtle strain. James wanted to donate more while I fretted stability. You're still chained to caution, he accused one sticky night. Storm brewing outside. It escalated. Words like selfish and ungrateful flung like thunderclaps. He slept on the couch, and I tossed in our bed. Regret a cold companion. Morning brought clarity, coffee black. Apologies poured. I fear losing you to this place's pull, he admitted, head on my shoulder. And I fear pushing you away, I confessed. We drove to the lake then. That's sacred dock. Unpacking not just us, but the legacies, Dad's silence as protection. Not shame, Harlan's rigidity as fear. Not hate. We're the bridge, James said, toes dangling in the water. Carrying it forward, fall deep in the bond, leaves turning in fiery testament. We hosted both families for a harvest feast in our loft, awkward at first. Dad and Harlan bonding over football on the TV. Mom swapping recipes like old friends. Laughter filled the space. Genuine now. And as night fell, James and I slipped to the balcony. City lights sprawling like stars. Marry me, he asked. Ring simple silver. Engraved with wait for me. Tears blur my yes. And we called everyone out. Cheers echoing into the skyline. The wedding was small. Elmwood Chapel rented neutral. Vows exchanged under stained glass that caught the light just so. Dad walked me down the aisle, his arms steady, eyes misty, while Harlan teared up beside James. A father's pride finally unchained. Vows were promises, through betrayals mended. Secrets shared, the dramatic sweep of lives intertwined. No perfection, but poetry, romantic in its raw humanity, emotional in its depth. Years later, with a kid of our own, adopted, wide-eyed wonder, we'd tell the story around campfires, sanitized for little ears, but true at core. Your grandpas fought shadows so we could chase light, I'd say, James's hand in mine. Elmwood endured, scar but standing, a testament to America's beating heart, flawed, fierce, forever capable of love's quiet revolution. And in quiet moments, by the lake or under city glow, I'd remember that kitchen confession, the hook that reeled us all in. Not an end, but a beginning, the past. Once a chain, now a compass pointing home.